The Mediterranean is heating up. Spain and Italy have just deployed warships to escort Gaza aid flotillas, directly challenging Israel's naval control. This isn't just humanitarian, it's geopolitical tension that could spiral into a wider crisis. Stay tuned, because what's happening at sea might change the balance of power in the Middle East. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are covering a massive development that could reshape Mediterranean geopolitics and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Spain and Italy have taken an extraordinary step by deploying naval forces to escort aid flotillas heading towards Gaza, directly challenging Israel's long-standing maritime blockade. For years, the Gaza Strip has been under an intense blockade by Israel, justified as a security measure to stop weapons from reaching Hamas. However, many humanitarian groups, the United Nations, and international legal experts have argued that the blockade severely restricts the flow of food, medicine, and other essentials to the civilian population. Now, for the first time in many years, two major European nations are stepping in, not just politically, but militarily. This move is not a small gesture. Warships are being deployed with clear orders to ensure that these aid flotillas reach their destination safely. This development signals a serious shift in Europe's stance toward the Gaza crisis. In today's video, we will break this down into 10 parts: why Spain and Italy made this decision, Israel's response, the risk of confrontation, the wider European perspective, US involvement, humanitarian impact, legal arguments, media framing, global reactions, and what might happen next. If this situation escalates, it could result in one of the most significant standoffs in the Mediterranean in decades. Stick around as we analyze this step by step and give you the full picture of what's unfolding right now. Let's start by understanding why Spain and Italy are stepping up so dramatically. Historically, European nations have preferred diplomacy and sanctions over military involvement when it comes to Middle East conflicts. This decision reflects both domestic and international pressures. In Spain, public opinion has been strongly pro-Palestinian for years, with large demonstrations calling for their government to take action. Italy has also seen growing calls from civil society and parliamentarians to help end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Both governments have been under pressure to match words with deeds, and after months of shocking images of civilian suffering, they are now taking action. Another factor is legal. Humanitarian organizations have been warning that aid deliveries are being blocked despite no evidence of weapons on board. By sending warships, Spain and Italy are signaling that international humanitarian law must be respected. They are also sending a message to Israel that Europe will not tolerate indefinite blockade policies that punish civilians. This move also reflects a shift in global power dynamics as Europe tries to assert an independent foreign policy stance, not just follow Washington's lead. The decision to use naval escorts shows that Madrid and Rome are ready to take political risks for what they see as a moral duty. This is more than a symbolic gesture. This is a show of force designed to ensure that humanitarian aid actually reaches Gaza and to test Israel's willingness to enforce its blockade in the face of international resistance. Now let's focus on Israel's immediate response. Unsurprisingly, Tel Aviv is furious at this move, seeing it as a direct challenge to its authority and its carefully maintained security architecture around Gaza. The Israeli government has reiterated that the maritime blockade is a necessary defense measure to prevent Hamas from importing weapons and advanced military technology. According to Israeli officials, every ship heading toward Gaza must be inspected, and any unauthorized vessel risks being intercepted by the Israeli Navy. This policy has been in place since 2007 and has been defended repeatedly by successive governments. With Spain and Italy deploying warships, Israel is forced to reconsider its options. Its military establishment has already increased naval patrols near Gaza and raised alert levels for possible maritime encounters. The Israeli media is framing this as a provocation that could compromise Israel's security and embolden Hamas. Behind closed doors, Israeli defense officials are discussing rules of engagement for a scenario where a European warship refuses to comply with interception orders. That would put Israel in a very difficult position. Backing down could weaken deterrence, but confrontation could trigger an international crisis. Diplomatically, Israel has already summoned the ambassadors of Spain and Italy to protest their decision. The Israeli Prime Minister has warned that no foreign intervention will compromise Israel's right to self-defense. Clearly, this situation is now on a knife's edge, with both sides aware that a single miscalculation at sea could turn into a full-blown international incident. Now, let's examine the very real risk of direct confrontation at sea. This is where things get dangerous. The Israeli Navy is highly trained and has a long record of enforcing the blockade, often boarding or diverting ships that attempt to breach it. But this time, the presence of Spanish and Italian warships changes everything. A scenario where Israeli commandos try to board an aid ship only to be confronted by European naval escorts could quickly escalate into a military standoff. Even a small incident like a warning shot, a radar lock, or an accidental collision could spiral out of control. Both European governments have reportedly given strict orders to their captains: avoid provocation, but protect the flotilla at all costs. This means they are prepared to position their vessels between Israeli forces and the aid ships, a tactic known as protective escort. The rules of engagement for both sides are likely very restrictive right now, but in high-pressure situations at sea, seconds matter, and miscommunication can lead to disaster. This is why many analysts are warning that the Mediterranean could see one of its most serious naval incidents in decades. NATO officials are reportedly monitoring the situation closely because Spain and Italy are both NATO members, which means that, in theory, an attack on their ships could trigger consultations under Article 4 of the NATO treaty. This could suddenly transform a regional dispute into a transatlantic crisis, something everyone wants to avoid. Let's look at the wider European dimension of this story. Spain and Italy may be leading the charge, but they are not acting in a vacuum. Across Europe, there is growing frustration with the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and with Israel's continued blockade. France, Ireland, and Belgium have all been vocal critics of Israeli policies and have called for stronger international action. The European Union has traditionally tried to maintain a balanced position, supporting Israel's security while also calling for humanitarian relief. But the situation has now reached a breaking point. European citizens have been protesting in large numbers, demanding that their governments do more than issue statements. Madrid and Rome's decision may force Brussels to take a more unified and forceful stance. Discussions are already underway in the European Parliament about possible sanctions or diplomatic pressure if Israel tries to stop the aid convoys. This is also an attempt by Europe to assert itself as a geopolitical player in the Middle East, instead of leaving everything to the United States. Spain and Italy are essentially saying that Europe has moral and strategic interests that must be respected. This could open a new chapter in EU foreign policy, one where European nations are willing to use limited military power for humanitarian purposes. Whether this becomes a coordinated European naval mission or remains a bilateral effort by Spain and Italy will depend on how the next few days unfold. Either way, Europe's credibility is now on the line. We cannot ignore the role of the United States in this situation. Washington has always been Israel's strongest ally, and historically, it has backed the blockade on Gaza as part of its broader policy to contain Hamas. However, the U.S. also values its relationship with European allies, especially Spain and Italy, who are key NATO partners. This situation creates a diplomatic dilemma for the White House. If the U.S. openly supports Israel's right to stop the flotillas, it risks angering European governments and widening the rift within NATO. On the other hand, if it pressures Israel to let the ships through, it could be accused domestically of compromising Israel's security. Early reports suggest that U.S. officials are engaged in quiet diplomacy, urging both sides to de-escalate and seek a negotiated solution before the flotilla reaches the blockade zone. There are discussions about whether the cargo could be inspected at sea under neutral supervision, satisfying Israel's security concerns while allowing the aid to proceed. But this is a narrow window and time is running out. If a confrontation occurs before diplomacy can work, the U.S. might be forced to intervene politically or even militarily to prevent escalation. This is one of the first times in years that Washington faces the possibility of being caught between Israel and NATO allies, a situation that could have far-reaching consequences for the alliance and for American credibility in the region. Beyond the politics, let's talk about the human side of this crisis, the people of Gaza. Gaza has been under blockade for over 16 years, and its population has faced chronic shortages of food, clean water, fuel, and medical supplies. Hospitals often run out of basic medicines. Power cuts are frequent, and unemployment is sky high. For ordinary Palestinians, the arrival of an international aid flotilla is a lifeline. If Spain and Italy succeed in escorting these ships, it could mean an immediate improvement in humanitarian conditions, more food on shelves, more medicine in clinics, and fuel for electricity generation. But the implications go beyond just this one delivery. If this mission is successful, it sets a precedent that could encourage more countries to send protected convoys, effectively breaking Israel's blockade. That would be a massive shift, potentially empowering Hamas politically, because it could claim victory and say its resistance strategy worked. Israel fears this outcome because it believes easing the blockade without disarming Hamas strengthens the group militarily. In other words, what is a humanitarian victory for civilians could also be seen as a strategic loss for Israel. This is why Tel Aviv is reluctant to allow any breach of its blockade, even for aid. The stakes for the people of Gaza are therefore incredibly high. They are caught between geopolitics and survival, waiting to see if this convoy will bring them relief or more suffering. Now let's dive into the legal angle, which is a key part of this debate. Under international maritime law, ships in international waters generally have the right to freedom of navigation. A state can only intercept them if there is credible evidence they are engaged in illegal activity, such as smuggling weapons or violating sanctions. Israel argues that because it is in an armed conflict with Hamas, its blockade is lawful under the laws of war. This position was partly upheld by a 2011 UN panel, but many legal scholars criticized that conclusion and argued the blockade amounts to collective punishment, which is prohibited under international law. Spain and Italy are clearly siding with the latter interpretation. They claim that blocking food and medicine for civilians is illegal and that they are therefore justified in ensuring safe passage for the aid flotilla. This makes the situation more than just a political dispute. It becomes a test case for international law itself. If Israel chooses to intercept these ships despite European naval protection, it could face legal challenges in international courts, not just diplomatic protests. On the other hand, if Spain and Italy forcibly prevent Israeli forces from boarding, they too could be accused of violating Israel's right to self-defense. This is a legal gray zone where both sides believe they have strong arguments, making a diplomatic resolution even more difficult but also more urgent. Another crucial factor is the media and information war surrounding this event. In modern conflicts, public perception often matters as much as military action. Across Europe, mainstream media outlets are portraying Spain and Italy's move as a brave humanitarian step, standing up for international law and the rights of civilians. In Israel, however, the media is framing it as dangerous foreign interference that undermines Israeli security. This polarization is also playing out online. Social media is flooded with videos, graphics, and hashtags supporting both sides. Fan-let aid through is trending across Europe, while Israeli accounts are using face security first to justify the blockade. This battle of narratives is shaping how the public sees the crisis and could influence political decisions in real time. Governments are very aware of how quickly public opinion can shift, especially if there is a confrontation at sea that results in casualties. A single viral video of an Israeli commando boarding an aid ship or a European warship confronting Israeli forces could change the political calculus overnight. This is why both sides are being extremely cautious and are also preparing media strategies in case of escalation. They know that this is not just a military or diplomatic conflict, it is also a struggle for legitimacy in the eyes of the world. Whoever wins the information war will have a major advantage in shaping the outcome of this crisis. So what happens next? The next few days are crucial as the aid flotilla approaches the blockade zone. If diplomacy works, we could see a compromise, perhaps supervised inspections of the cargo by a neutral third party, after which the ships would be allowed to continue to Gaza. This would be a face-saving solution for all sides and prevent a dangerous confrontation. However, if no deal is reached, the likelihood of a standoff increases dramatically. Spain and Italy have made it clear they will not back down, and Israel has stated it will not allow unauthorized ships to reach Gaza. This means we could witness a tense naval encounter where every move is watched by satellites, drones, and international media. NATO may be forced to get involved diplomatically to prevent one of its own members from clashing with Israel. The outcome of this crisis will have lasting implications. If Spain and Italy succeed, other nations might follow their lead, permanently changing how aid reaches Gaza. If Israel enforces its blockade despite European warships, it could strain relations with Europe and lead to new diplomatic confrontations. One thing is certain, the world is watching closely, and what happens here could set a precedent for how humanitarian crises are handled in conflict zones everywhere. This is about more than ships and cargo. It's about principles, power, and the future of international order in one of the most volatile regions on Earth.